The following is a CUNY TV special presentation.
Welcome, CBC trustees and friends and members of the Board of Trustees and staff of the City University who are here with us. Our guest today is James B. Milken, but no one talks about him that way. He's just JB, the Chancellor of the City University of New York. He was appointed Chancellor and Professor of Law at CUNY Law School effective June 1, 2014. Prior to his appointment at CUNY, he served for 10 years as President of the University of Nebraska, where he also held appointments as Professor in the College of Law and the School of Public Administration. He previously served as a Senior Vice President of the 16-campus University of North Carolina. JB is a graduate of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and the NYU Law School. He lives in Manhattan with his wife, Nana Smith, who's with us, and he has 2 sons and a daughter who kind of, I suspect, are at the age where they move in and out. The City University, which Chancellor Milken leads, is the 3rd largest university system in the country, with almost 275,000 students enrolled in degree-granting programs. Most of them are graduates of New York City public schools. 40% of CUNY students are the first in their families to attend college, and 40% were born in another country. It is a huge operation with a budget of about $3.2 billion, 45,000 faculty and staff working at 24 campuses, including 7 community, 11 four-year colleges, a law school, a school of journalism, a graduate center, a graduate center and a school of public health, and a soon-to-open medical school. There are also an additional 250,000 students in continuing ed and professional education programs, and CUNY runs extensive pre-college and community outreach programs throughout New York City. It ain't Nebraska. I have a special attachment to CUNY because I won't go into detail about it, but I did spend some time there before I joined CBC, starting a program to accelerate the graduation of students in the community colleges, and I very much enjoyed and I'm very proud of the program that we created there. Today, we welcome the Chancellor and look forward to hearing about his plans and challenges steering this very important New York institution. Please welcome J.B. Milken.
I'm delighted to be with you. The Citizens Budget Commission has a great reputation in the city and the state as being a thoughtful commentator and having a great perspective on government finances and budgets, and that's something we're quite concerned with right now. I have a buffer zone here of CUNY trustees, Rita DiMartino, Una Clark, Wellington Chen, Barry Schwartz. Thank you all for being here to protect me in case people rush the stage. I also have 3 of my guides to New York City who keep saying things like, Carol did, this ain't Nebraska. So I'm delighted to have Iris here today, Weinschall, and to have Jay Kriegel, and to have George Arts, who are all looking out for me to keep me from stepping in anything. You may want to come up closer here and help me with my notes. So Carol said a little bit about this amazing institution that is CUNY. For more than 150 years, it has been the gateway to progress for New Yorkers, often who come with few of the advantages that many college goers have. So 40% of our students born in another country, they speak over 200 languages today. 40% report coming from families with a household income of $20,000 or less. This is truly a group that benefits more from access to higher education and the opportunity to succeed and get a degree and then change their lives and change their trajectory for their families for generations. So this is the remarkable promise of CUNY, and it has always been known for its great access. Tuition today, I have a daughter, one of these people who goes in and out, who's a high school senior, and so I'm looking at tuition even more than usual. CUNY's is $6,300 a year for a senior college tuition. So you can go to Baruch, which is the largest undergraduate business school in the country, and get a first-rate degree from fabulous faculty, and the tuition $6,300. Now, even at that, though, 70% of our students don't pay tuition because of Pell and the tuition assistance program in New York. So it continues to be this magnet and this place of tremendous access and opportunity. But what I want to tell you a little bit about today also is about the incredible quality of CUNY, because we talk so much about the access and the cost that some of this gets lost. But first, before we do that, given the discussion that we're in today, that is occupying some debate in Albany and some in the city, and frankly across the country about the future of public higher education. If you go to Wisconsin or Illinois or Arizona, you'll see some of these same, what I consider to be disturbing discussions about the value proposition of public higher education. Remember that 70% of the degrees awarded in this country come from institutions of public higher education. So this is the game changer, has been since 1862, when Abraham Lincoln dramatically increased the investment of this country in public higher education. So, but I want to say a word about CUNY's unique history and its position today. From 1961, Governor Rockefeller supported the new organization of public higher education. And then in 1979, when the legislature sort of rewrote in the heels of the fiscal crisis to restructure the finances of the City University of New York and also the governance at that time. So I'm going to quote a little bit from this just to give us the foundation here. So the legislature designed CUNY as an institution with a distinct mission. It was to be an independent system of higher education, responsive to the needs of its urban setting. That's why the independence, so that the focal point of this board and the administration, the faculty and staff of CUNY would be the urban setting, the 8.5 million people that are in New York City. It should operate as an integrated system with close collaboration between the community colleges and the senior colleges. And Carol mentioned how many community colleges we have. You know, today our senior colleges, which are first-rate, Hunter, Baruch, City, Brooklyn, Queens, each of those are over 50% transfer students among their undergraduates. Part of the magic of CUNY, the way that it works, is students entering in large numbers in our community colleges, becoming proficient, and moving on to the senior colleges. Hence this close integration, which was designed decades ago and works tremendously well today. Over the last decade, we have had double the number of students transfer to our senior colleges from our community colleges that did 10 years ago. Finally, the legislature said, and something that is obvious from the comments that Carol made about CUNY and what I've said so far, the City University is of vital importance as a vehicle for the upward mobility of the disadvantaged in the city of New York. And it has done that tremendously well for decades. Over 60% of the graduates of all of New York City's high schools, public and private, that go to college, go to CUNY. 40% are the first in their families to go, as I mentioned before, 40% born in another country. It gives a whole new meaning to international students at college, which my colleagues around the country, how many international students do you have? I said, well, if you mean the people who are actually born somewhere else and go here, it's about half of our students. 3/4 of the New York City students that get Pell Grants, that sort of federal building block for affordability in higher education, go to CUNY. So you take that population that needs financial aid the most, they're at CUNY. The graduates from CUNY earn an estimated $63 billion last year, money that goes to support their families, New York. And it's about twice what they would have earned had they not gone to college. So now I want to say a word about on the other side of CUNY. So the public higher education is about two things, really at core. It's about the sort of balance and keeping in equilibrium and balance this affordability, this access, this cost effectiveness, and high quality. Because without both of these, it's not of value to the students, it's not of value to society. CUNY's graduates have won 13 Nobel Prizes. This last summer, there was a story in one of the higher ed publications, which took me back, but then I realized, of course, of all the MacArthur geniuses in the United States, there are only 2 public universities in the top 10 alma maters of MacArthur geniuses, Berkeley and CUNY. But I have to note that about 2 months ago, there was a law school ranking that came out. #1 public interest law school in the country used to be Berkeley, now it's CUNY. So I'm glad to see, I hope we move above Berkeley in some other ways too. Our students won 39 Fulbrights in the last 2 years. I had dinner with a member of the Fulbright board who told me that's impossible. I said, no, it's not impossible, that's what happened. I could introduce you to them. I recently met a student, almost by accident, at a student event I went to. She came back to talk about, give some encouragement to our students. This is not a completely atypical story, although it's a pretty good story. She came here when she was 9 years old, I think, with her family, immigrants from Pakistan, political refugees. Her parents found it very difficult to get employment. They were professionals in Pakistan, but difficult to get licensed and find work here. She went to Brooklyn College. That was her opportunity to go to school. When she graduated from Brooklyn College, she went to Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. Now she's a second-year Harvard Medical School student. And this is the tremendous potential that exists across this city for the opportunity that CUNY provides. For this group, something you may be especially interested in is the value proposition of CUNY. The Washington Monthly, which does rankings on these kinds of things, much better in my view than I hope Bill Halber, no one is here, than U.S. News and the other places that are ranking based on how many students you reject in a year and in the total resources that you put into the budget, the inputs of money. Washington Monthly does a bang for the buck value proposition. I guess Kiplinger does the same thing. The last one I saw had, I think, the top 3 positions were CUNY colleges in the nation, and 4 or 5 were in the top 10. It's a remarkable accomplishment, and it is both this high quality and the affordability. I'm not going to go through the benefits of higher education. You know it all, the income potential, the social indicators that are all positively correlated with educational attainment and what it means in a knowledge economy for the city, region, state, nation to be competitive. I want to say a word back on this notion about opportunity and why CUNY is so important. So nationally, half of the people from higher income families, top quintile, receive a bachelor's degree by 25, 1/2. If you're in the lowest quintile, 1 in 10 get a bachelor's degree by the time they're 25. But the good news is when children born in the bottom quintile, many of our students get a college degree, their chances of making it to the top quadruple. If you are in the bottom half, your chances of making it out increase dramatically. This is why Andy Grove, who is a CUNY graduate and former head of Intel, said that CUNY was the American dream machine, which I think was right when he said it, and I think it's right today. Now, we've got a lot of work to do. CUNY's been a great turnaround story. People are happy with the progress made over the last 10 to 15 years. I think it's been tremendous. But there's some areas where we definitely need to do better, and we're not alone in this. Graduation rates at public colleges and universities of this country are not where they should be, and they're certainly not where they should be at CUNY. One of the reasons is that our students come in facing more challenges than most, and they need more support, which is one of the reasons that I think we need to be talking about the investment in CUNY. So let me give you one statistic. Nationally, the 3-year graduation rate for community colleges in urban areas is 15%. That means in 3 years, 85% have not received a 2-year degree at a community college. It's completely unacceptable. It's a waste of resources and talent. So, ASAP, the program Carol developed and was the first director of, is one of the most amazing programs in the country. It has doubled and tripled the graduation rates at community colleges. So compared to a cohort that is a 20% graduation rate, we have 55% three-year graduation rate right now, compared to 15 nationally in community colleges. It costs money, but the cost per degree, much lower than the cost per degree now for a graduation rate of 15 to 20%. Because of the support of the city and the state, primarily the city, we're dramatically increasing this number of students who participate, 4,000 last year to 25,000 students by 2018. One of our colleges, the Bronx Community College, will be 100% ASAP. So we will address the question of whether you can scale this program across a university, and I think you can. 87% of the ASAP students are Black, Hispanic, or Asian. So CUNY is addressing some of the greatest needs in public higher education today. Carol mentioned our medical school. This is another great, I think, fits. People have said to me, well, why do we need another medical school? If you look at what CUNY's mission is and what the medical school's mission is, it fits so well and addresses a need that is not otherwise met. We have a 40-year-old program called the Sophie Davis School of Biomedical. It's 45% of its students. These are students who then transferred on to medical schools to finish their degree program. 45% of them were African American, Latino. That compares to a national average of about 10 or 11%. 70% of our graduates went on to practice in federally designated underserved areas. This is a mission for a medical school that fits perfectly with CUNY's mission and fits to the tradition of CUNY serving the city. So now I'm going to mention a word or two about the budget. So what keeps me awake at night is the idea that some of this amazing success of CUNY may be at risk today. The executive budget, which came out on January 13th, surprised, I don't know if it surprised everyone, it surprised me certainly, with a proposed shift to the city of 30% of the investment from the state, $485 million, shifted from the state's budget to the city's budget. Now, that also included a $240 million contribution to our bargaining contracts, which is a whole other story, the contracts that haven't been settled in 5 and 6 years. So that was a valuable recognition of the need for an investment. But the shift was not, I would say, universally well received. In theory, it is revenue neutral for CUNY. I mean, whether the state provides the funding, the city provides the funding, this has changed over time, certainly changed dramatically in 1979. It's a decision that will be made not by us, but by political leaders. What I think my obligation is, our obligation is to convince people that there needs to be more investment in CUNY, not less. What we really need is a secure and stable and adequate source of funding for CUNY's programs, regardless of the source of funding. The governor's office subsequently has made some statements about administrative costs and at CUNY and SUNY. Sent a letter about the highest paid state employees. Maybe you saw something about this. The 50 highest paid public employees in the state were at SUNY and CUNY, 47 at SUNY, 3 at CUNY. It may not surprise you that across the country that's the case in every single other state. If you look at California, Florida, Texas, Illinois, Michigan. It's because universities are in national and in some cases international markets for highly educated, competitive places. What I find more troubling, if I had it, I would have brought it with me, but there's a map that has had some currency over the past few months showing it's color-coded, the highest paid public employees in every state. I'd say out of 50, 45 are basketball or football coaches. Now, that's one problem New York doesn't have. Or I'm not sure that's a problem. We don't have good enough college basketball or football, so I think we have a surgeon who's at one of the hospitals who's the highest paid. But seriously, I think that this is not this is not a discussion that we shouldn't be having. I am a believer in cost effectiveness and efficiency. This year we reduced the administrative costs at the central office by 6%, reduced it across CUNY. We've frozen about everything that can be frozen. But the most important thing is not that, is not these sort of stopgap or one-time things. The most important thing is these are big bureaucracies, whether it's state government or large universities with a $3.5 billion budget. They have inertia. You need to keep looking at them, and one of the reasons is there are few sources of money at public institutions for investing in faculty, academic advising, and student success in the core mission of the place. There's tax dollars, there's tuition, there's private funding, and then there's reallocated resources from within. So we have to constantly be looking at taking money from the lower priorities and putting it into the higher priorities, and we will continue to do that. We've been a national leader in a number of areas, in shared services, for instance. A lot of talk about it today. One of the great advantages for the third largest system in the country is that we're in one place. So we can do things like consolidate IT, HR, security, facilities management and construction, and other areas. It would be quite difficult, I think, for SUNY with 64 campuses across state, or the University of California from Berkeley to San Diego. At CUNY, it works, and it's a great advantage, but we need to keep looking at doing that and do more of it. There are a couple people in the room I know that are interested in capital, so I'll say 2 sentences. We aren't going to have time. I'm not going to have time unless you ask me a question to talk about capital, where CUNY's average building's over 50 years old, and many of them are over 100 years old. We did a study about a decade ago with SUNY that showed we had a backlog of $3.2 billion in deferred maintenance. We've been knocking that down. It's about $2.5 billion now, but you can't stop. And the real issue is that CUNY has grown in the last decade by 55,000 degree-seeking students. So that's a population about 20% larger than the University of Michigan that we have grown in the last decade without a significant expansion in available space. Our buildings are open, many of them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is a critical need, particularly in areas of science and health, not only for our students' opportunity, but for the economy and the services needed in New York. So that's a little bit snapshot, repeating what Carol said, about the mandate that CUNY has been given by the state and how it's executed on it, which I think has been remarkably well. Can we do better? Absolutely. And we're going to do everything we can to increase our graduation rates, make sure more of our students are successful, get through remediation, get degrees, support their families, contribute to the infrastructure of New York, and do it in as cost-effective a way as we can. That's my pledge to you. Thanks very much. Happy to answer any questions.
If one steps back and looks at CUNY from afar, it, of course, is one of the most remarkable institutions in the country. And at the same time, because of its mission, self-defined mission, the mission keeps on expanding, if you will, through, let's call it mission creep, of serving the community, which is what its core mission is. Yet the cost of serving the community as it currently exists continues to rise disproportionately to governmental support, which is the ultimate alternative to tuition and alumni. If you're to look down the road 10 years, let's say, the problems of today, I suspect, can only exacerbate unless there's significant structural change. Structural change might be separation of community colleges versus the university structure being rolled into the state perhaps, or some other alternative, or looking at the administrative costs, which true at CUNY as well as every other major academic institution have risen disproportionately to faculty salaries. what do you see on a long-term basis to be able to move from where we are to where we need be so the mission can be fulfilled?
Thank you. You're sitting at the trustee table. Did they give you that question? So that's a lot of stuff, and I'm not sure I can unpack all that and answer it now. First of all, I don't believe there is a self-defined mission. I don't want to quibble, but I read the state's mission. I think that's our guidepost, and that's what CUNY has to be responsive to. And I look at what has happened with the growth of CUNY over the last decade or two, and I think it is quite consistent with that mission. Now, I do think that we have an issue with increasing costs at every institution of public higher education across the country. It's not a secret, and part of this can be part of this is the responsibility of a regulatory system that keeps adding responsibilities to universities, public and private, and we have to hire administrative non-teaching staff to manage that. Part of it is support structure for students at CUNY, and by the way, I make no apologies, I'd like to hire 5 times the advisors that we have in place now so that our students would succeed. I see no evidence, I'm aware of no evidence that would demonstrate that there is an effectiveness, a cost effectiveness to increasing the size of the university system. Say, take SUNY today and add CUNY and have a 40% larger university system. I think that you would still need a structure in New York City that's focused on the needs here, which are different than the needs outside of the city. So I actually think this was wise in 1961 and 1979 to structure it the way it was. And I tried to make the point about the integration. There's no place in the country that has more close integration among colleges because of our location, and the community college, senior college integration is really one of the beauties of CUNY. So separating that, I think, would be a huge mistake, and I don't think it would lead to any more cost effectiveness. So how do we address this? The increasing, first of all, we have to constantly be vigilant about the costs at CUNY. And part of the good thing about somebody new coming in is to say, I didn't own this buildup in some areas. I'm happy to refocus and reallocate and get rid of it. Public higher education is increasingly supported much more by private funds. I think that has to happen at CUNY as well. And it's not just alumni. But I think there are great opportunities at CUNY. It's part of why we've done a deep dive across the system now, one of the best firms in the country that represents all of the largest public universities that are doing multi-billion-dollar campaigns, to say, what are the investments that are needed today in fundraising at CUNY so that we can take advantage of what the potential is? Today, we don't have the infrastructure and the capacity to do that. We raise $250 million a year. We should raise over $500 million a year. So that, I mean, part of it is diversifying the resource base, because since 1986 across the country, state governments have provided a declining share of the total costs of public universities. So CUNY's increased tuition, but nothing like other public universities have. And that's something we have to be vigilant about as well. So I think it's a changing mix of revenue. It is vigilance about the administrative costs. It is actually talking to government funders and sponsors about the regulatory scheme in a state or a city, and whether we ought to be looking at what some places like Colorado and Virginia and others have done, where they have said, we want you to be more entrepreneurial, and so we are going to change the regulatory system from the one that applies to the Department of Roads or the Department of Sanitation to one that is more appropriate for an institution that is competing in a global marketplace for talent and resources.
There are many seasoned veterans in the room that have gone through the budget wars, and we know that the initial ask is not always where the result turns out, and it's a bit of certainly a back and forth. So we're just kind of curious about, what can you kind of offer part of the way to get towards that 485, and are there any sacrosanct programs? And kind of related to that, my wife's a physician and she teaches medicine, and medical schools in particular are very expensive to run. So how do you ramp that up while you're trying to hold the line on the budget?
Yeah. So, as I said before, and I hope you understand that I'm authentic when I say this, I do believe that we should be looking at cost effectiveness and efficiency of operation, particularly in the non-teaching, non-academic side of the house. That doesn't mean I think CUNY it should take a significant cut. I don't believe it should. I think CUNY is significantly underfunded compared to other public universities in the country, and it has a significantly greater challenge than almost any public university in the country. When you look at 80% of our incoming students at a community college need remedial education that we pay for, it's a tremendous financial burden and administrative burden that other universities don't have. So I think given the challenges that CUNY has and that our students have, New York has figured out about the best way going to address this. Now, as I said, I'm all for moving resources, but a cut in CUNY's budget doesn't move anything. It doesn't invest any more money in the academic side of the house. I can agree to certain reallocations and reductions, but I still think we ought to be investing more. One of the reasons that ASAP works so well is that we have about 4 times the number of advisors that we have for the student population. It's hugely important. Our students need support in advising more than students at other universities, and they get less because we can't afford to pay for more. So I have a long list of things that we could invest in, either with state investment, city investment, or reallocated resources, and I'm all for moving them from one place to another. That's very different than just a reduction, which does not benefit at all those students that we're trying to help, those 500,000 students that are at CUNY today. With the medical school, it's a good question. I've been involved in running a number of medical schools, and they are expensive. This is different. First of all, we have clinical partnerships. We have no investment in the clinical operations in New York. We are going to work with groups of hospitals to provide, as house officers in our medical school, provide the clinical education in the last 2 years of medical education. So we're taking the Sophie Davis program, which was a 3-year undergraduate program for very talented students coming out of high school, and 2 years of the non-clinical medical education, and then they transferred to places like NYU or Einstein or Columbia or others. Those spots dried up. So those 70 students that are disproportionately underrepresented students who are practicing where you want them to practice in New York to serve underrepresented communities, we're going to have nowhere to go. So we had 2 choices: shut it down or finish it by finding partners who would help us to provide at the lowest cost, the most effective way possible for CUNY, the last 2 years of clinical education. And I think we found that. And I think not only does it fit well with CUNY's mission, it's a tremendous benefit to the city and to these future doctors who would have not had this opportunity otherwise. So I'm in agreement with you, but I think this is a redesigned medical school that does not look like what you and I think of as traditional medical education.
In the material on our tables here about SUNY and your remarks, I don't see anything mentioned at all about online education.
So this will, the people nearest me may gag over this because this is one of my favorite themes. I want CUNY to be one of the national leaders for a variety of reasons in online education. And I will tell you, by some measures, we already are. Our undergraduate programs fully online were ranked 13th in the nation recently. Huh? 11th. Oh, thank you. 11th. I knew there was a reason the provost was here to correct me, and I'm happy it's only happened once so far. We're 11th in the nation right now in the quality of our online programs. What we need to do is grow them significantly for a variety of reasons. One is that we've probably got, who knows the number, over 1 million people in New York who are not going to school, who have some credits toward a degree and no degree. for whatever reason, they aren't pursuing it. We need to provide more opportunities, even though we have 24 campuses, for people to do this online in the way that people want to learn today. But I think it's also an opportunity for revenue growth. I've seen this at other places. I think CUNY has a tremendous brand, and I think the brand promise of a high-quality CUNY education at a reasonable cost is a revenue opportunity for us if we do this right. So I think online education is one of those areas where CUNY has probably not invested significantly enough, done some very good things, I said, but I think there's huge potential. I thank you for raising it.
I went to Penn State many years ago and had a nutty structural professor. So if the branch units of Penn State, the first 2 years, sent someone to this engineer's class that was not qualified to be in his class, he would send them back. What avenues do you have if K through 12 are sending you folks who are not qualified? Is it dragging you down the system? Is it costing you more money for people coming to you who are not qualified, which would basically be hurting financially CUNY?
It clearly costs us money. I mean, the burden of the remedial needs that I mentioned earlier clearly costs CUNY money. I mean, we have programs where we charge very successful programs, CUNY Start, for instance, Summer Start. We charge $75 to students to do their remedial education, and then we remit that in the most case, so it doesn't cost them anything. So those are costs that we're eating, and we could tell you what those costs are. I'd rather not, but they're significant, and they probably should not be borne entirely by CUNY. So we need to work. We've been working closely with DOE. We have probably a closer relationship with DOE than almost any university system in the country has with its K-12 system. But there need to be improvements in a variety of ways in this. But one of them, as I mentioned, the CUNY Start and SUNY Start, CUNY Start and Summer Start, these are innovative programs that we are doing to try to take some of the cost out because we're more rapidly getting people past their developmental education needs. An innovation like ASAP, which is now being developed in Ohio, Tennessee's looking at, in other places, is viewed as the gold standard in the country. This is a stubborn problem. The number of students who come with remedial needs and the success rates of students, particularly in math, moving out of remediation, and it's one of our highest priorities to try to, at least on our side, do a better job of helping these people overcome those remedial needs. Now, ultimately, would we rather see the number go significantly down so that that's an investment that we're not making at higher education? Yes.
In construction, we call it back-charging contractors to do what they're supposed to do. If you do that a couple times, they learn their lessons.
Yeah, I'm not sure that either Penn State or contracting is the same environment that CUNY operates in.
I came to the U.S. as a foreign student. I came from a British country, and so I spelled differently. I spelled C-O-L-O-U-R, you spell C-O-L-O-R, and I had to get help at Brooklyn Community College to make my transition. Not that I wasn't smart enough, but because the systems were different. And because CUNY caters to so many foreign-born students, I think it would be a waste of talent if we did not have a CUNY who could help those students then to make their contribution to the city of New York and the country as a whole. I haven't gone back to Jamaica since I got here, and I think I've paid back my debt to the United States, learning to spell the way Americans spell.
Our remedial spelling program is not as large as the math program. But
Could you talk about what's going on with the 5-year unresolved labor contracts and what the issues are?
Yeah, sure. I'm glad you asked that. So this is the gift that keeps on giving. When I got here, I said, hey, by the way, some of the things you should clean up on the first couple of weeks. We haven't given our faculty a pay raise in 4.5 years and our classified unions in 5.5 years. So for whatever reason, that was the state of play, and it is to this day the state of play. So While I didn't create it, I now own it. And we're doing everything we can to try to resolve this because, frankly, our faculty salaries are not, they're not what they pay at Penn State. They're not competitive with leading public universities across the country, and obviously the cost of living in New York is higher than almost any place else in the nation. These faculty are here, as far as I can tell, largely for two reasons. One, they want to be in New York City, and that's great. And two, and probably primarily, they want to be at CUNY. They love the mission of this place. But we can't take advantage of them because of that. We need to be paying them a fair salary to do what they do. So we can only agree to a contract that we can pay for. And so I have captured most of the last 2 years of tuition increases, which when I got here I was told you can't use that to pay for contracts. You can only use it for new expenditures. I said, wait a minute, if we can't pay our bills today, why are we adding more bills? So I said, we're not going to do that. I don't care what the deal is. We're going to put this money in a box, and we're going to use it to settle our contracts. So we made an offer. It was considered inadequate. It was an offer we made in November, and it actually has some risk attached to it for us, some significant risk, depending on what happens with our budget in this next year. The union came back with a significantly higher offer. After 25 or so negotiating sessions, we asked PERB to bring in a mediator. So we have an impartial mediator now. We have sessions starting next week. We're talking to both the union that represents about 26,000 of our employees, the faculty and staff, and then the next largest is DC 37 that has about 13,000 of our employees. But the main sticking point here is being able to pay the bills that you incur. I think all of us, the board certainly has said many times this is their highest priority. How can we get past this unfortunate period in our history and be competitive for faculty and pay our faculty a fair salary? But the sticking point is the cost. And that's why I was so pleased to see, as part of the governor's budget proposal, a $240 million investment. We have a huge retroactive sort of backlog in our pay. We haven't had a contract since 2009 for our classified staff, 2010 for our faculty and academic staff. And so, as you can imagine, in other state contracts, there's a 4% increase in 2010. SUNY, for instance, our faculty and staff did not get the benefit of that. That number continues to grow. Last year, we said it was $240 million. This year, it's well over $300 million. So we are looking for some additional investment that will help us to be in the position that we need. We're doing everything we can to reallocate to be able to pay ongoing costs going forward. And we readily concede that that's our obligation, and we're going to do that. But to get to this big backlog, we need help. Thank you very much.